Welcome to NFL Daily's top 25 players of the last 25 years. I'm Gregg Rosenthal here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio, alongside one of my favorite people to talk ball with, the man, Steve Wyche, who has been covering this league nonstop for the last couple of decades, mostly here at NFL Network. Are you ready to count down from numbers 20 to number 16 on this list?
I am. This is such an amazing concept. You know, when you talk about like impactful players, whatever, in this list you came up with, stylistically, I mean, the fact you pulled this off, I think, is great.
Well, don't get ahead of ourselves here. We got to make it great. But no, we had a great first episode with Mina Kimes. I'm looking forward to talking these 5 players today. Let's get going.
Number 20, Myles Garrett.
Burrow to throw. Here comes Garrett. There it is. Myles Garrett. Welcome to the 100 Club. He takes down Joe Burrow. 100 career sacks for the future Hall of Famer.
But yeah, I wanted to make it known that I'm the guy. I'm number one, edge defender, and that was a statement I was intending to make, and I think I made.
Gay's gonna try it from 60. It's blocked. Ball loose. Fight for it. Denzel Ward picks it up. Ward running across the Indianapolis 30.
That was Myles Garrett that blocked that field goal. Jumps right over.
He jumped right over the center.
Man.
He went Superman. No contact.
They do uniquely that maybe other teams don't. I mean, that may be why you all struggle the way that you all have.
We have Myles Garrett. That's different from everybody else.
Under pressure from Myles. Ball out. Fight for it to the end zone. Myles got home again. Who's got it? Browns do. Touchdown.
Myles Garrett is single-handedly taking over this game.
Myles Garrett, number 20 on the list. You heard the voices of many people there, but some of our friends, Patrick Claybon with the great voiceover, of course, but also Andrew Siciliano. You heard Joe Burrow talking about what's the difference between facing them and other teams. Yeah, here's the difference. It's Myles freaking Garrett. I'll get into all the accomplishments of why he is on this list. You might notice if you're listening, the back end of the list is heavily weighted towards some of these current players. It's going to get different soon, but I just realized Garrett already has the resume of an all-time great.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways we can go here. But first off, the fact he has 102 sacks in 8 seasons, I don't think people understand how hard it is to get a sack, especially when you're like the guy on the defense. When people are double-teaming you, you saw some chips on the play right there while it blew right through him. Plus, he's 6'4", 275. Right? He's built like a sleek defensive tackle. By comparison, T.J. Watt is 6'4", 250. So this is a massive human being doing some of the things athletically that he does. But the way that Cleveland also, especially Jim Schwartz, who's come in last couple of years and moved him around, that's helped him. Because he's got 60 sacks the past 4 years. But here's the biggest part, which shows his dominance, right? Like, he does not play on a team that gets 20-point leads and is forcing the other team to throw the ball 45 times a game. His team is usually trailing. He's had 2 winning seasons and played on an 0-16 team, right? So his team is usually trailing. Man. So his opportunities to get to the quarterback are probably far less than some other great pass rushers like a Dwight Freeney, someone like that, whose teams stake leads all the time. Like, when you talk about impactful greatness, this is a dude who is winning regardless of circumstance.
Yeah, I think of the players that are going to be on this list who have been on this list, including Garrett, who have done it in the toughest of situations. I think you have to be that much better, not only as a player to get the attention from the national media, to get those all-pros, but also to stay strong as a man, as a player, to continue to chase greatness. And yeah, just to go over some of the accomplishments off the top: 4 first-team All-Pros and 2 second-team All-Pros in 7 years. He had that Defensive Player of the Year award from a couple years ago where he was just taking over games. But he has 2 other seasons where he was in the top 5. Only 2 players in NFL history have had more consecutive 10-sack seasons. Those 2 players are Hall of Famers, Reggie White and John Randall, and that number is still growing. Myles Garrett, I think, is going to continue getting those numbers. I don't know if he hasn't peaked, that's something else, but he and TJ Watt, who we also hit in the first show with Mina, they were a little mind-blowing for me to realize, like, okay, they are still playing, but actually, if you look at their resumes and stack them up against some other Hall of Famers, they are already among the all-time greats. So I felt like it would not be doing a service to Myles Garrett to just diminish him just because he's in the middle of his career.
No, I mean, you can't do that. This is going to continue to grow. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame type guy. Look, 7 straight seasons with double-digit sack. On the teams he's played on, remember, an 0-16 team. That is insane. He's very good against the run. You saw him block that kick right there. Remember the last couple of years, they started moving him over the center a little bit. He is still one of the best athletes in the NFL at that size. Again, it is just, there's nothing you can really do except try to go away from him. He knows it, and he still makes plays. It is so hard. Like in college, I played the same position as this guy, 60 pounds lighter, but it is so hard to get a sack in the NFL. When you think about quarterbacks dropping back 400 times a season and getting sacked 32 times, like that's a hard thing to do. And he's getting double digits 7 years in a row.
Yeah, and he's also, he racks it up since he's entered the league, 3rd in tackles for loss, 2nd in quarterback hits. So it's not even just the sacks, which are just outrageous. He's the first ever player, by the way, to have 14 or more for 4 straight years. So it's the consistency. I love what you said about the weight. It is crazy. He actually weighs more, 275, than what Aaron Donald said he was playing at the end of his career. And 2 of the all-time greats, obviously, but a guy who, when he came out, Myles Garrett, and I went back to check some of the coverage at the time, was just a no-brainer, number 1 overall pick, because you look at him, and yes, all these players on this list have a discipline and a work ethic and an intelligence, but a lot of them also are just incredible athletic specimens. And I do think of Myles Garrett.
Oh, he's one of one.
Towards the very, very top of that, where if like you are creating a football player in a lab, it is Myles Garrett. It's kind of a ridiculous person to be next to. You've been around him.
I've been around him.
Okay, let's hear it.
First of his arms are like 30 inches big, but we see the videos of him. He's got like 80-pound dumbbells in each hand doing 36-inch plyometric jumps.
Well, that's him jumping over the center. So that field goal block that he had a couple years ago, that Colts game.
Why does he have to hold this? My shoulder will fall off. But it's funny when you talk about him coming out, because I remember getting a couple phone calls, and Don Blackman, the former Patriots linebacker, longtime NFL coach, father of our Tiffany Blackman, our former colleague Tiffany Blackman, he called me one day. He was just down at Texas A&M scouting. He's like, Steve, this guy is going to completely change things in the NFL. I heard from several other people, Don Blackman, who's a heck of a player and a longtime great coach himself, the way he raved about Myles Garrett, you're like, no way he's going to live up to this hype. And again, playing that position, registering the number of sacks he has on a team that plays with no leads, stunning. He's that great.
He's the youngest player to get to 100 sacks. He's been on PFF's first team All-Pro 5 straight years. And I actually find PFF's rankings interesting, if only because they're not as consistent as the All-Pros, because it's just in theory on their numbers. And yet the numbers even have him first each and every season. That quote we heard from Garrett was from a game this last season. And I don't think of 2024 as Garrett's best season. Still was one of the very best players and came in 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year. But, it wasn't like his very best. But that was a game against the Steelers in TJ Watt. And he shows up and he says, I want to be known as the best edge rusher. So he shows up. He has 8 pressures, 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and something else on Thursday Night Football.
Snow globe game.
Because it was a big game, and that does make me think, like, man, imagine if he was playing in more big games, because when he's had to get up, he's gotten up for him.
I mean, imagine if he played on a team like the Bengals, right, that could score 38 points a game, where teams are chasing them, or something like that. The numbers would just, when you look at the great pass rushers, even guys going back as far as Deacon Jones, when they didn't record sacks, he played with Roman Gabriel, quarterback who was an MVP, teams that scored points that way. So, he's one of those, like, as great as he is, it's almost like a what if. And you have to think about a former Cleveland Brown and Joe Thomas. Played 11 seasons, never went to the playoffs. He's only been to the playoffs twice, Myles Garrett.
Well, Joe Thomas has a chance to be on this list. I'm not doing any spoilers early, but the Browns, I will say, have over-indexed on all-time great players. And you mentioned the 0-16 for listeners who might not be aware. Yeah, that was Garrett's rookie season.
His only year he didn't have double-digit sacks.
But also, like, what a welcome to the NFL moment. Poor Garrett, poor Deshaun Kaiser going out there, not winning a single game. And you know what's interesting? That draft, he goes number 1 overall. It was a terrible top 5 in hindsight.
Yes.
Mitchell Trubisky 2, Solomon Thomas 3, Leonard Fournette 4, Corey Davis 5. I have never once heard anyone say that the Browns made a mistake for drafting Myles Garrett in a draft that had Patrick Mahomes. You always give the grief to the 49ers, for instance, who needed a quarterback that year.
The Bears.
And the Bears especially,
Right.
who took Mitchell Trubisky. But no one ever says, well, how come the Browns didn't take Patrick Mahomes?
Great point.
Because, like, you took Myles Garrett, and ultimately, like, that, you have to be pretty great for no one to ever bring that up.
You know what? Browns fans are loving you right now because that's one of the few times when they're like, wow, they didn't make a mistake.
Right. But now you could say they did. But no one knew who Patrick Mahomes was going to be. There was a little story, and I know you're intimately involved with the Hall of Fame. I'll leave you with this on Myles Garrett. He was there with his teammates in the preseason a few years ago, I think, playing the Hall of Fame game. And they all went and did a tour.
Right, when Joe Thomas went in.
And everyone said afterwards it was like being a kid in a candy store. It was amazing, except for Myles Garrett. And Myles Garrett stayed on the bus all by himself while the team toured the Hall of Fame because he said, I'm not going in there until my bust is going in.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking. I heard Steve Smith did the same thing.
That's built different. That's someone with like
Built
a certain sort of confidence. And I think it is really cool that Garrett is going to be a Brown. And if it's not for his whole career, it's going to be for the next handful of years too. And he's already, like I said, the youngest player to reach 100 sacks. He's been in the league a long time. He came in at 21. But he basically it's going to seem like his whole career is with the Browns. Hopefully the whole.
And he's made a lot of money from the Cleveland Browns as well.
Yes, he did not take a discount on that salary. Know your worth, people. Myles Garrett definitely knows it now because he's number 20 on our list. All right, let's move to our next guy.
Number 19, Zack Martin.
Zack Martin, I always like to watch his film because he's been doing it for a long time and he's such a technical player. Like his technique and his effort make him stand out.
Just his pass set, he's always seems like he's in the right position. If somehow he does get caught, he's always recovering. He's in a good base.
Anybody doubted a nickel of Zack Martin's worth?
You see him, he's constantly kicking ass, and that's just what he does.
Zack Martin, who's been one of the best in the NFL for a long time.
Knows all the tricks of the trade, savvy, and got technique to go with it. That's a tough combination.
Zack Martin comes up huge on this play.
Football is such an amazing sport because we can go through who are the best players, these last 25 years, and we can have Myles Garrett, who to me, in terms of pure athleticism, strength and speed, that's what you think about when football players is number one, of who I would think of. And then the very next guy on this list is a guy in Zack Martin, who we don't even know what play to pick as like his highlight tape because he's an interior offensive lineman who they said, quote unquote, wasn't athletic enough to play at left tackle. They move him inside to guard. And when I looked at his resume, Steve, I just had a hard time not putting him on this list somewhat as a representative for guards and interior offensive linemen, but also just because he is that good.
He's a great player. I mean, when I saw his name on there, I don't know if you have a committee, if you did this single-handedly.
I did it by myself.
Bro, like this is a stroke of genius, a guard who could be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, guards usually have to wait. Great guys like Will Shields and waited for years. And maybe Zach ends up doing that, after retiring this past March. But it's funny when you think of Zack Martin and all of his greatness and this and that. What's the first thing that people talk about? They link him with Johnny Manziel, right? Because remember in that draft in 2014, people were connecting Johnny Manziel because of the flash. Jerry Jones said a lot of positive stuff about him, a Texas guy going there, and they needed a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're taking Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football right here, and they draft Zack Martin. And you talk about, it's like the amusement park ride where you're spinning and then the floor drops out. everybody was like, what? Zack Martin when they could have had Johnny Manziel? This might go down as the best pick that they've had in the past 25 years in the draft. And the fact that it was such a surprise and they get such a great player. I mean, 7 first-team All-Pros, 9 Pro Bowls, and he played, 11 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, that is like, we're talking, I keep saying, you know how hard that is? Especially in today's game. Over the past 5 years when defenses have been like, we've got the singular great edge rushers, like we talked about with Myles Garrett. Now we're blitzing guys up the A-gaps, right? That's what the guards have to do. They have to eat that, right? When linebackers, Fred Warner and whatnot, are coming with 2 or 3 yard full speed, and he just locks them up. And so we can talk about all the Dallas' strong running game with Ezekiel Elliott, the protection for Dak Prescott. When you look at a guy who did so much and absolutely made them look like the smartest people in the world for drafting him over Johnny Manziel. Now, Johnny had something to do with that, but what a brilliant stroke by the Cowboys.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up because I would have forgotten it. The funny thing is, you want to give Jerry Jones credit, right? Okay, they did take Zack Martin. Jerry Jones actually got on the podium after the Zack Martin pick and said, we could have taken Manziel and that would have paved the way in terms of the attention that we're getting, the box office, for our relevance. He literally used the word relevance for the next decade.
America's team.
But we took this other guy. He had to be convinced into taking Zack Martin. He really wanted Johnny Manziel, and it was obviously one of the best decisions the front office ever made, and they got Jerry Jones, even though they got the pick right. Don't say that you wanted Manziel because the other guy could turn into a Hall of Famer. So you mentioned the first team All-Pros, 9 in 11 years total, 7 first teams. He basically was an All-Pro every single year he was healthy.
Healthy, right.
The only 2 years that he didn't make it were his age 30 season in 2020, first time really he ever got injured. Before that, he essentially almost didn't miss a snap, missed one game, I believe, from injury in 2018. So he was always out there. In that entire time, the 7 first-team All-Pros, he had exactly 7 holding calls. I mean, if that's the thing. I went through, and I did not have Martin on my initial list, and I went through everything, and some of his numbers, and then some of the things I read from different offensive line analysts who know the position even better than me, really believe that the gap between Martin and the next best guard of his era was maybe bigger than the gap at any position between any player. So that's
hard to disagree with that. I mean, it's really hard to disagree with that. He is one of the most dominant. We can talk about interior, whatever. He's one of the most dominant linemen over the past 30 or so years for what he did. Because, again, the game has changed. You got all the A-gap action, right? You got the Aaron Donalds and guys like that, the defensive tackles who are making big money now, a lot more than guards. You know, that's where they wreak hell. And nobody beat him. But the 7 holding calls, there was always this great stat. Like, I forget, you know, what is the Cowboys, they have 7 first downs on that drive. Oh, that ties just as many holding calls as Zack Martin
right
in his career.
And only 21 total penalties, so that includes false starts and anything else. And if you compare that, and it's not totally fair, but if you compare that to other all-time greats on the offensive line and tackles, interior, he really did stand out. And they say, you know, everything I read about him is his footwork, it's his technique, and I think with all offensive linemen, it's the ability to stay so mentally engaged and so smart that you can do it each and every single snap without making any mistakes.
Well, the fact he didn't get called on holding is the brilliance of technique, because, you know, it's all inside hand control or to leverage a guy this way or that way. So you're grabbing, right? Cloth control is what they call it. You're in here grabbing, and the fact he never got caught means he stayed in here. You know how strong you have to be, whether it's upper body or you're squatting and you've got this type of technique. Like this dude, when I saw him on it, I was like, Gregg Rosenthal is that guy.
Okay. Well, Offensive Rookie of the Year, his first year, he got a number of votes, which is really saying something because he's a guard. You just don't see those guys get Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was first-team All-Pro as a rookie because he came in, and if you'll remember, that 2014 Cowboy season was Tony Romo's best season. He got MVP votes. Their offense went to a whole nother level. I think it was DeMarco Murray won the rushing title. It is not a coincidence that Martin comes in. They get 2 more rushing titles, by the way, with Martin there, with Ezekiel Elliott. So Romo, I read some things that he said about Martin, and he said he's the only player he's ever seen that when he came on to the team as a rookie, I mean, he was like not only the best player at his position, but he was maybe the best player on the offense when he joined the team. And that's saying something for a guy who was 3rd in MVP voting that year, and DeMarco Murray's winning everything. So he came in just absolutely no weaknesses, and we had to give him some love. And I have to admit, though, he's the only interior offensive lineman that's going to be on this list.
Well, good for you.
So I apologize. If any people are curious out there, just guys because I like to give a little bit of a shout out, guys who did not make the list, and we'll do this sometimes when we hit a position that's going to be the last time we have that position. Steve Hutchinson was tough to leave off. 5 first-team All-Pros was the All 2000s. I mean, yeah, a lot of Hall of Famers are getting left off. Alan Faneca, Jari Evans are also not on this list, and neither is Jason Kelsey, different position, but that was a tough one too. So I wanted Martin is kind of representing them all.
Man, that's a big flag he's planted right there by you.
I mean, the Jason Kelsey one too, because he has 6 first-team All-Pros, but just the way people talked about him. There's a guy, Mike Gettings, who runs a pro scouting service called Pro Scout that the NFL uses. He was the scout I was referring to that said the only gap he thought in his entire career that was similar at another position was how they used to talk about Dwight Stevenson at center back in the day, that he would put Zack Martin right there with the greatest guards of all time. So Zack Martin, number 19. Let's move on to our next guy on the list.
Number 18, Julius Peppers.
Get him moving a little. Pump fake, he's hit. Off the ball is close, and Julius Peppers had it. So long, Peppers.
Oh, man, you know who hit him? It was Fields, number 58, came in and just crunched Michael Vick. There isn't a man on this field that's going to catch Julius Peppers. Watch this. Look at the athletic ability of him. He just one-hands the ball, and goodbye.
You're going to give me my respect, well, I'm going to take it. So how you want it? How you want it? How you want it? He has 2 distinct sides to his personality. There's Julius, laid back, chill, nonchalant. And then there's the football player they call Pep. Explosive, disruptive, relentless.
We can get into so much with Julius Peppers, but let's start with the first play that we heard there. That was Mike Patrick and Paul McGuire, both great broadcasters with ESPN. Rest in peace, Mike Patrick recently passed away. And that interception return where Peppers, picks it up one-handed and then runs at that size for the touchdown, to me exemplifies just how he was an athlete that is just rare in every possible way.
Yeah, I think I actually covered that game when I was covering the Atlanta Falcons. And the tackle that he beat, Todd Weiner, was like a really good player. He was Michael Vick's blindside tackle. And it's funny, 2 years ago, I do the door knocks, the Hall of Fame crew. And 2 years ago, when Bruce Smith was knocking on his door, we're going through the whole process, I kept saying to myself, like, man, Julius Peppers is a first ballot Hall of Famer. And then you don't realize he's got the 4th most sacks of all time, right? 159.5. Because what you just mentioned, everyone thinks of Julius Peppers because he played basketball at North Carolina as an athlete, right? You don't look at him like the same way we talked about Myles Garrett or Lawrence Taylor or Deacon Jones, like as that badass edge rusher who's just taking names and putting bodies in the ground, right? You look at him as a super athlete who got his way done. But then you just look at the fact 11 interceptions, 4 of them return for a touchdown. Now when you're 6'8", okay, part of that, but I mean, it's 2 all-decade teams. Right? This guy played for 18 years.
That's what did it, Steve. That's what helped push him on this list. When I saw that he was second-team Hall of Fame all-decade in the 2000s for the Hall of Fame,
right,
and actually first-team from Pro Football Reference. They do their own list, and I thought that was an interesting other voice to listen to in the 2000s. And then he's also on the Hall of Fame all 2010s and second team for the Pro Football Reference all 2010s. That was what did it, because I'm trying not to over-reward longevity. I want to be about, like, greatness.
Right.
But he did have that high-level greatness, and the longevity put it over the top for me.
But he wasn't a compiler, right?
No.
A lot of people are like, oh, Frank Gore's got these great numbers, but he was a compiler because he played for so long. Pep was still giving you double-digit sacks in years 14, 15, playing for the Bears, playing for the Packers. He was still putting up big numbers. And, unlike Myles Garrett, he played on some really good Panthers teams. He played in Super Bowls, right? He really affected things. But in covering that division, when I worked in Atlanta from 2005 to 2008, like the Panthers were the team. It was always the Panthers and the Falcons, and everyone's trying to out-athlete each other, right? The Panthers got Thomas Davis because he was a hybrid safety linebacker who could spy Michael Vick. He's a guy who could run with Michael Vick. And then you see Julius Peppers, like there's nobody on the offensive line. There's no running back or whatever that could handle him, whether it be power, whether it be finesse. And because Pep didn't say much, we heard him talking a little smack on that video clip, but Pep's a real quiet guy. You never were just like, man, he took over a game. And you're just saying to yourself, like, he made a spectacular play here and there, but he never took over a game. So you're wondering, like, is he really that guy? And then you go back and think about, like, oh, yeah, he really was. What was I watching?
Right, and it kind of accumulated slowly because he won Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yep.
He was thought he was the number 2 overall pick in the draft and viewed as, a generational type of athlete. I actually think him and Garrett have a lot of similarities.
I agree.
In terms of coming out of the draft. And there was a sense in Carolina, could he be even more? But 3 first-team All-Pros, 3 second-team All-Pros, and like you mentioned, those are sprinkled over a number of years. Only player ever with 100 sacks and 10 interceptions. And one thing that strikes me is he got to the end of these contracts. So that says a lot.
Yeah.
7 years with the Panthers, and then he signs a record-breaking at the time defensive contract for the Bears, ends up 4 years with the Bears, lasted a while there. He did get cut by the Bears. Then he gets a 3-year big contract from the Packers at 34 years old. He plays through the end of that contract and played very well. He, I asked Ross Tucker about him, who went up against him, just on text and everything. And he said he thinks he's the most athletic player he ever played against. And actually, it was Peppers, or it was either Ross's first game or I think Peppers' first game, that he says he put Ross on the ground and literally jumped over him. So that's the type of thing that he did. I want to talk about a 2-play sequence, and this was back in 2004, just sort of as an example of how great Peppers was and what kind of player he was, if younger fans maybe don't have an idea. It was a 2-play sequence against the Broncos, and if you have a chance, we are doing this show on YouTube as well, so everyone check that out. But there's a run at the 1-yard line where Jake Plummer is going to the edge, and he absolutely has the angle on Julius Peppers. This is an athletic player, and Peppers somehow runs him down. This is at the end of a 10-play drive. The very next play after Peppers, in theory, is winded, backs up in coverage. I challenge a cornerback to have that good coverage, and he goes over 100 yards, and he does not make it to the very end. The piano,
he doesn't get that. So
the piano falls on his back. I think it's 103 yards, but he only gets to the 3-yard line. But those 2 plays in a row, he said he was sucking wind before that play even started because he had just run down Plummer, and then he ends up having this long interception return. And that, to me, is kind of an example of what kind of freak he was.
And for people, again, who don't realize this, Jake Plummer was a hell of an athlete.
Yes.
Like, he's a dude who used to run all the time. He was on the move. And for Pep just to chase him down like that and then make this play, I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, the linebacker who's trying to get to Plummer should have turned around and picked off the guy so Pep could have got to the house. But still, here's the other thing, 52 forced fumbles. So you think about that. He had 11 picks and 52 forced fumbles. Right? That's an opportunity for 63 changed possessions. That is the ultimate difference maker, regardless of who he's playing for. That's why he's able to play in Super Bowls and do some of the great things that he did. I
think of players on this list, they got to stand out to me. And Peppers, he just felt like he was a player from the future. You could, he was drafted now 20 years ago. And if he was, more than that, right? 23 years ago.
Right.
If you dropped him in the 2025 class, he would still be the number 1 pick, number 2 pick.
Well, yeah, first or second pick.
You know what I mean? Like
first, not quarterback.
He was from the future, as great as he looks on these clips, now just comparing him to what was going on back then, one thing underrated about him, maybe his motor. He missed 4 games as a rookie. After that, only 2 more his entire career. And if you look at like the percentage of snaps he was on the field,
he didn't come off.
Like he did not come off the field. So he was a guy who made it onto my list late. I had some tough decisions. He went in over Freeney. He went in over Von Miller. If I did this list again, like he might be on it next time. I had a hard time leaving Von Miller off, but he is over Von Miller. He is over Jason Taylor and some more of the great pass rushers.
When you talk about a pass rusher from the future, like, can you imagine he played in Dom Capers' 34, where they played that hard edge setting defensive. If he was able to play like a wide 9, like the stuff Saleh does and the stuff that Vic Fangio does, how he could get one-on-one matchups, his numbers would be bigger than they are now.
Absolutely. So Julius Peppers on the list. And yeah, if you're thinking about edge players, by the way, Michael Strahan was a really tough guy to leave off because a lot of the great part of his career was in the 90s. So the 25-year cutoff hurt Michael Strahan, although he was pretty awesome.
Yes, he was.
In the 2000s. He had a very strong case. So it's very tough to pick these guys, but I think Julius will do us proud. All right, we'll be back after this, the next 2 players. Back on NFL Daily, talking about the best 25 players of the last 25 years. Steve and you suggested we should do a show on the omissions. I don't want to make people mad, though. Maybe after...
like this list. Any list is going to make people mad about who's not on it.
Well, yeah, they won't know until we get to the end, although I'm spoiling it a little bit. We might have to do a follow-up with some reaction, maybe a mailbag. If anyone
I like that.
Thinks that I got anything really wrong. I don't think, unless people are crazy, there's going to be any arguments about the next guy on our list.
Number 17, Adrian Peterson.
This is perhaps one of the greatest single-handed runs I've seen. And Adrian Peterson just refused to go down.
Handoff on 3rd down. He runs to a 1st down. He sprints to the far side across the 50. He breaks the tackle, and Adrian Peterson is loose. He has scored a 65-yard touchdown.
Best running back of this generation would be Adrian Peterson.
With the mindset I have, and the guys I have up front, I know anything is possible. That's why I continue to do the things, working hard in practice.
Just the slightest of openings, and Peterson goes all the way.
I like to refer to Adrian Peterson as an animal. The guy is just relentless. He doesn't stop.
Adrian Peterson came into the NFL as one of the best college runners in history.
Out of Oklahoma.
In day one in the NFL, he was one of, if not the best running backs in the NFL. 4 first-team All-Pros, a few more seconds. The last non-quarterback to win the MVP back in 2012. I'll let you go with your first memory, instinct, anything covering this guy.
Well, look, my first thing is the first time my dumbass shook his hand. Right? So you always heard when Adrian Peterson shakes your hand, he's going to break it. He broke it. I was like, what did I do, man? Like, what did I do? So every time after we're fist bumping. I mean, that thing is real. And, you hear about guys who are real strong in the weight room. I don't know what he did in the weight room, but he's got what I call pipe bending strength. Like, he could just take a freaking engine block out with his bare hands. He's so strong. And then you couple that with the speed and the vision, because the Vikings made no bones about what they were going to do with him in the backfield. They're giving him the ball. He's going to run it. Try and stop me with you can. Now, he had a really good offensive line in front of him, but there were still guys who were able to try to get to him, and either he shook them, knocked them over. It was amazing. Like, I tell people, one thing that blows my mind about Adrian Peterson was he played for as long as he did. Because after a year or two, people realized how strong he was. They would load up on him. I mean, I saw him take some shots that would knock people out. He just ran right through them, got up, and you know what? It just deflated. I forget, it was a game in the Metrodome against somebody, and a DB hit him as hard as I've seen a player ever get hit. And he just shook it off like Okay, that's like all day. That's my name all day. You're going to be feeling it. And that DB was like, man, that dude just walked through my right hand, basically. And the fact that he just did all of that was exemplified in 2012, Rosie, when he comes off the torn ACL at the end, Christmas Eve of 2011, comes back the next year when Leslie Frazier is coaching the Vikings, and rushes for almost 2,100 yards. Right? They gave him the ball 348 times off of a torn ACL. And he put up 2,000 yards running the ball. Like, he's that special. He had over 1,000 yards, like, at the end of his career when he was playing for Washington.
Right. And he's on this list because of those first, 7 years.
Right.
When he did not leave the field. And we remember him, leading the NFL in rushing, coming off that torn ACL. That 2012 season that you mentioned, that was the year he won the MVP. That was the year he goes for 2,097 rushing yards, still the second most ever, 2,300 yards from scrimmage. And of all the guys on this list that I've gone back and watched some of the highlights, I think he put the biggest smile on my face. Just like watching this dude gallop in the open field. Some people are just born to do something, and this man was born to run a football, and you could see the joy that he played with. He obviously played with a toughness, but I just felt like running hard is a skill, and running backs can only do it for so long. You only have maybe so many times you're going to get hit. If there was a metric for running hard, to me, he is my all-time leader in running hard per carry, because every single carry of his career, he brought that juice. And that's why, despite all the injuries that slowed him down in the back half of his career, he still played till he was 36, because he still was helping a team out by just running that hard.
Well, I mean, remember the season when he kept on fumbling the ball because he was trying to get the extra yard? That was the thing. He was always trying to get the extra yard. Guys are punching out. It comes back the next year and doesn't put the ball on the ground. I mean, it goes to show you how much it meant to him. Here's something people don't think about when they talk about Adrian Peterson. When you go back when he played those games at the old Metrodome, the turf on that field was like that long. It was a slow track. This is your definition of a
for our
slow
listeners.
track.
About what, 3 or 4 inches?
About 2.5,
okay,
3 inches long. Like, it was long, like uncut grass for 3 weeks. The fast turf, like today's field turf, is maybe a centimeter off the foundation with those rubber pellets in there. If he had played on some of that shorter turf where he could actually dig in tougher and deliver blows and play a little fast, I don't know if his career would have been as long. I don't know. But the physicality he was able to play with, the first time I went to the Metrodome, I was like, why would you have this long of turf with a running back like Adrian Peterson? I would replace this stuff and get on a fast track. And it was just, for years, he played on that type of turf and still put up unbelievable numbers.
Yeah, his first really 7 seasons in the NFL, he had one minor injury about 6 years in that caused him to miss about 4 games, but he's putting up 1,700 yards on the ground, 1,300, 1,200, and then the big 2,000. He, as just like a pure runner, you're giving the ball, he was not known for his like blocking ability. He had a lot of big receptions actually per catch, because if you just got him on a little swing or anything, like he would take it to the house a lot of times. I saw a lot of those on his highlights, but he was not as complete a back maybe as a Marshall Faulk or LaDainian Tomlinson, for instance. Even that first year where he didn't get All-Pro, it was actually Brian Westbrook in his best season who got the first team All-Pro, had like 2,300 yards. But in just terms of running the ball, lateral ability, shifting gears, like what stands out to you watching him?
The vision and the power.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, you saw some of the highlights, because, as big and strong as he was, like his waist, he probably had like a 28-inch waist. Right? So guys who'd come in to take big shots at him, there wasn't a ton in the midsection to hit. He ran kind of straight up. He wasn't necessarily always bowing guys with the shoulders when he ran. So he was dipping, like he could shake a guy. The great running backs could shake a guy in the phone booth, the proverbial phone booth. He was that guy. But then there was just so much heat and strength behind it. You're like, okay, do I hit him in the thigh, which is the strongest muscle group of his body, and he's going to, concuss me, or what am I doing here? So he was frustrating to play play against. And when I think about the 2012 season too. Christian Ponder was his quarterback.
Oh man,
his leading receiver was Percy Harvin. Like the Brett Favre era was gone, right? You know that brief stint.
Wow,
and
that's a good call. That he had the 2,097 yards with Ponder as his quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, you see why he got the ball as many times as he did. And they only won 10 games. They had to win their final 4 games that season to get into the playoffs. And they lose in the wild card. But I mean, what that dude did, like he's going to be the last running back to go into the Hall of Fame. He's eligible in 27. He'll be the last running back to go in until Derrick Henry, probably. Maybe Marshawn, maybe. But when you think about the way football has changed, he is the last big bell cow until you get to Derrick Henry.
It's great. It's a great call. Now, I am hoping that the voters consider my guy, Frank Gore, over time. I'm not saying that he's going to get in day one because he, to me, was a truly excellent player. But you're right. I did not put those guys on this list. I did think about Derrick Henry. He would be the running back right now who would have a chance. Certainly Gore, CMC. There's been some great backs, but Peterson's different. And the fact on a bunch of bad teams, he did make the NFC Championship game with Brett Favre, as you mentioned. They made the playoffs a couple times in that 08-09 window, but he did not have a chance to have a lot of playoff success, and yet everyone knew he was that dude. I'm going to throw to an old colleague of ours, a guy I used to enjoy working with on a outfit called, what was it called? NFL Plus back in the day. This is Ike Taylor being interviewed for the NFL 100 series.
Does he make it?
Heck yeah, he make it. The man can sit out for 2 years. He gonna make it. He gotta make the top 100. Nightmare. He Jason. Freddy Krueger. Like when you talk about the Minnesota Vikings when Adrian Peterson playing, we have to stop this guy.
That was just funny to me that he made the top 101 in a year that he didn't play. There's enough players just voted for him anyways.
That's respect.
Ike is the absolute best.
Yes, he is.
I enjoy watching him play so much that why not? Let's actually throw it back to his time in Washington. Not what people think of with Adrian Peterson, but him ripping off. And when I went through his greatest plays, so many of them are 40 to 70 yarders. This guy was a drive in one play. Yeah. He was a big play machine.
It's Peterson, big hole, first down and more, still going. Adrian Peterson inside the 20, the 10, touchdown, 64 yards.
I just like that he was still getting it.
That was like year 12.
At the end of his career.
And I'm telling you, man, the load he took and the shots he took, if you were on the field and you watched some of the shots he took before he was coming through the whole line of scrimmage, he took some licks and just, I know the other dude's worse off than me.
It was an amazing combination of a slasher, like he was the slasher, and not afraid to take contact and get that extra 2 or 3 yards through contact, like they teach you. But also, when he was in the open field on so many of these big plays, his footwork, just the way he would set guys up and those feet just suddenly start moving really quick when he's about to, make a cut. It just froze defenders, and then he gets past them, and you're not going to catch him.
He's a throwback. I mean, he's a 70s running back. He's a Franco Harris guy. Franco didn't have his speed, but Earl Campbell type of guy.
Yes.
I mean, he would have fit so well in that era.
All right. Our next guy would have fit in absolutely any era, I have to admit. I feel bad. And this is true for a lot of these guys coming up. We're getting to the real meat of this list. I feel bad for not having him higher.
Number 16, Drew Brees.
Brees is under center. The snap, the spin, the fake handoff, drops back 7, throws a soft pass in the end zone, backpedaling catch, touchdown! It's grabbed by Hill. That's it. That's the record. Drew Brees is thrown for more touchdown passes than any quarterback in professional football history.
Drew Brees is an all-around quarterback. Anytime you think of Drew Brees, you think about the records he had broken.
Drops back, looks to the far sideline, wide open, Traquan Smith. And Traquan Smith is going to go to the end zone. Drew Brees has done it.
You have just witnessed history in New Orleans. Drew Brees is the NFL's all-time leading passer.
Thomas in the backfield. Here's the throw to Shockey, and it's a touchdown. Jeremy Shockey in the slot to the right. The Saints are back in the end zone on a 2-yard touchdown strike.
Magician? He'd make it happen. Drew make it happen, baby. Yeah, Drew make it happen.
A record setter in so many categories. The leader in passing yards so many times. Set the passing yards record. Set the touchdown mark at one point in his career. A guy who now is second all-time in passing yards and touchdowns to Tom Brady, but a guy who was as consistent as anyone could possibly be, but also had some of the highest of highs. One of those touchdown calls you heard there was a go-ahead touchdown to Jeremy Shockey with under 6 minutes to go in the Super Bowl. Everyone remembers Tracy Porter, but it took Drew Brees driving down the field and making it happen to go take that lead.
Well, I mean, his competitiveness, we hear this about all the great ones, was unmatched. And it's not just on the field or training. The stories you hear, talking to our old colleague, Chase Daniel, who backed up Drew Brees for years, like the preparation he had in meetings and the way he would see the field and see the game, and then was in tune with Sean Payton as a play caller, was like next level. Like everybody who came from playing behind Drew Brees says they learned how to prepare now. So when they would go to their next team, they could train younger guys on how to study for meetings. But, here's a couple cool things about Drew Brees, okay? Other than Marcus Colston, Jeremy Shockey, Jimmy Graham, until Michael Thomas came at the end of his career, like who are his receivers? It was a revolving door of receivers, right? But here's a great story that Jameis Winston told me why Drew Brees was so good. Because the one stat you didn't talk about that we finally started talking about because of Drew Brees, completion percentage. So Jameis said they were playing a game. They were down 2 scores with like 4 minutes left. So what's Jameis is thinking? We got to take some shots here. Like he's on the side. He's on the sideline. Brees is playing, and Brees is methodically 7 yards here, 9 yards here. So they end up scoring a touchdown, but there's only like a minute and a half left on the clock. So he's like, man, why weren't you taking shots? What are we doing? What are the plays we're calling? He's like, hey, protect the ball. You play within the offense. You move the ball down the field. We see you got in the end zone. We got a defense that can take the ball away. We'll get another chance to get back in there. They get another chance. They didn't win the game. But where so many quarterbacks are thinking, okay, adrenaline's pumping. We got to go do this. Brees is like, this is how we do things here. This is what works. This is why, Jameis, you're throwing 30 picks a season, and I'm throwing 9. and it's just, I covered so many Saints games during the Brees era, and just seeing him. I'm 6'2", right? He's about my height, maybe a little shorter, maybe. He's not as small as you think. People try to diminish his size. But what Sean Payton did with him because of his size helped teams build their offensive lines a certain way and open the door for shorter quarterbacks, the Tuas of the world, the Bakers of the world. And that's built them guard to guard, right? You talked about Jari Evans, one of the best guards of the era, and some of these interior alignments. So now you got a pocket. You got a stud like Teron Armstead and some of these other guys here to handle the one-on-one stuff. But more and more teams these days, because of Drew Brees and the way the success he had stepping up into the pocket, build their teams guard, center, guard to create throwing lanes for their shorter quarterbacks.
So I love what you said about the completion percentage, which is a stat that I thought at some points could get a little overrated. But I think in Brees' case, and he finished his career 5 straight years over 70%. Like he was setting the record. Like there were 3 straight years where he had like 72, 74, 74%, just numbers that you've never seen before. The reason why it mattered so much, because not just because he was making the right football play and throwing to the open receiver, was that it was setting up, despite his reputation, one of the most efficient deep ball throwers in the history of the NFL. If you go back and you look through his greatest plays and some of the most important plays of his career, and I went and did that this week, you know how many of them are to Devery Henderson and Robert Meacham and Brandon Cooks?
I would say plus 40.
Like so many. And you want to know why that is? Because you're playing zone against Drew Brees, and he's pick, pick you apart on 8, 9, 11, 8, 9, 11, and then suddenly you get caught sleeping, and there goes Brandon Cooks for 89. And you know, like, how perfectly each one of those passes were. He did not have the arm of Favre or Rodgers or anything like that, but his timing made up for it and turned him into, I think, the most underrated deep ball thrower ever, because it was such a huge part of his game. And even volume-wise, they threw a lot of deep balls, even late in his career, and they hit him because it was one part of his excellence setting up another part.
And look, part of it was the play. Again, I must have covered, I could pay state taxes in Louisiana. I've covered so many Saints games in the Brees era, but look, they had one of the best screen games, you know, with Reggie Bush and then Pierre Thomas, right? So they used the screen game as the run game. We know how much they love the tight ends in the red zone. I mean, even Benjamin Watson, I think, had a 13 touchdown catch season.
Shockey was great with them.
Jeremy Shockey, Jimmy Graham. I mean, so they utilized a lot of things to set up the deep throws. But the one thing about Brees too, you always see he had this kind of motion where when he would throw it, it was almost like, you know, the Greek god type of, he was leaning back like, man, how does he see? And he just trusts his preparation so much and his practice reps so much, because he's got this odd thing. If we go back and look at his highlights, you'll see some of those throws, but so much of it is built on the preparation. Let's not forget, this was a dude, people thought his career was over when he left the Chargers, and he had a debilitating, super damaged shoulder, to where when he went on free agent visits with the Dolphins, when Nick Saban was coaching them, and the Saints, the Dolphins are like, yeah, we don't think he's going to be able to last because of that shoulder. Goes to the Saints in 2006 after they returned from San Antonio because of Hurricane Katrina, and just starts dialing it up.
I am so glad you mentioned the San Diego years, because his entry into the NFL was really bumpy. He did not play as a rookie.
I think Doug Flutie was playing.
Doug Flutie was playing, and you know, he was a early second-round pick because of the size. Probably he was 6 feet. You're saying he's looking at you eye to eye. He's listed at 6 feet. I don't know.
He's a little taller than that. Maybe in cleats.
Maybe it was because he also, compared to some of the quarterbacks, relatively slight. I remember, you know, I've walked by him and stuff. He just in a different setting, he looks like a normal guy. Okay. Most of these guys don't look like normal guys.
No.
So he comes in his second year after not playing as a rookie, and he's okay. It's up and down, but he's showing promise. The next year, he gets benched in the middle of the year. They are 2-9. He is struggling. He has more interceptions than touchdowns. Doesn't totally get along with his head coach. There's
Marty Schottenheimer was coaching.
There's kind of like conversation of like, does he have a good attitude? Like stuff like this. And now knowing his history, like he was a competitor and that team was terrible. And he was put in a tough spot, benched. They draft Phillip Rivers in the next draft. Phillip Rivers is going to start over him, and Brees' career is in a really tough place until Rivers holds out a training camp. Very Chargers-esque. Contract negotiations. They can't agree to a contract. Brees comes out the next year, and he wins Comeback Player of the Year. He is awesome in training camp. He is awesome in the season. He does not let Rivers get on the field, and he ends up, you know, starting another year in front of Rivers, also playing well, but as you mentioned, hurts his shoulder at the very end of it, and that sets up the free agency visit where he wanted to play with Miami. They didn't want him, and he ends up changing, you know, a city forever. And that's
he could run for governor right now. He would win 100% of the votes.
I don't know if any one player has had a bigger impact on their city than Drew Brees.
You might be right.
Had on New Orleans.
You might be right. He is worshipped. He is held in that high of regard. And when we think about the prime years, Greg, you know, you're in New Orleans a lot. You're a Tulane grad. That guy, what he did for that city, the way he embraced that city, especially coming post-Katrina, when he showed up there with Sean Payton as a tandem in 2006.
Right, so that's their first season and is easily his best season as a pro up until that point. He gets all-pro first team in that season. People don't remember. There were not really high expectations. They go 10-6. They win a playoff game. They get to the NFC Championship game that year and get turned back. And Brees, you suddenly realize this marriage between him and Peyton, how he started winning from the neck up, and Lance Moore, and just that whole team.
They were just
one of
so
my
fun to
favorites,
watch.
Reggie Bush.
Deuce McAllister. I mean, it's just so fun to watch those teams.
So I mentioned that's his all-pro team, and he could be higher on this list. I didn't want it to be all quarterbacks at the top. It could be. You know, there are a number of quarterbacks.
Hold up real quick.
Yes.
You said that was his all-pro season.
Yes.
His only all-pro season.
And that's what's tough about Brees. Evaluate him this way. He had some of the best seasons ever that didn't win MVP. And he did win second team all-pro 4 different times. And it's to Manning twice.
Manning, Brady, and Rodgers.
It's to Mahomes. And right. It's to some of the greatest players of all time. And his 2011 season, and I would argue at 2009, because I actually was writing a column for NBCSports.com at the time, I thought Drew Brees should have been the MVP that season, in the regular season, over Peyton Manning. So while it doesn't look as great that he only gets 1 first-team All-Pro, 2 of those seasons, man, he had a strong argument for it. Rodgers had a crazy 2011 season.
Right.
You know, Manning was great in 2009. I would have picked Brees, but Saints fans will tell you, like, he could easily have 3 MVPs. So I'm not going to kill him that he was the second best player in the NFL in those seasons.
Here's a validation. He's up to go to Canton next year.
Well, yes. There's no.
He's going in.
Well, yeah, he's one of those guys you don't even have to make an argument. No. So don't come after me.
I'm not coming after you. I mean, I'm just saying.
I'm talking about the listeners out there.
I love the guy. I mean,
anticipating.
I love the dude. I'm just kind of like, isn't it crazy that he was this great? That he's one of the leading passers of all time, and he made the Pro Bowl or the All-Pro team once because again he played in. Look at the era. He talked about Manning, Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes, some of the great quarterbacks, and he only was able to make it one time.
And yet he won. You know, it's crazy. He actually won 2 Offensive Players of the Year. So that you would think is like a higher honor. But in those years where 2 of those years where he came in second for MVP, they kind of gave him the consolation prize because he had such an incredible year, and he ends up winning Offensive Player of the Year. He won Comeback Player of the Year, but it was not in the year that he's coming back from that horrible shoulder surgery.
It was the hand.
It's from getting benched. It was from being bad in San Diego. He actually won Comeback Player of the Year in San Diego. So I struggled. At first, I had Lamar Jackson over him. He was in our first episode in between 21 and 25, Lamar Jackson, because his highs have been so high.
The MVPs, multiple MVPs.
And then when I looked at it, though, I was like, man, Drew Brees' highs are pretty.
You're not going to get
freaking
an argument for that.
Okay. I'm just like, they are amazing, leading the league in passing so many times. One of the best to ever do it. Steve Wyche is one of the best to ever do it. I'm glad you came in for this.
I'm so glad you asked me to do this. When you told me the project, you know how I was like, this is great, and you pulled it off so far. Well done.
We've just getting going here. Our next episode, we will tackle players 15 through 12. That is going to be a lot of fun. We'll see you next time.